Will rivalry weekend for the 2025 college football season live up to the hype? You guys, we finally made it to the end of the SpOp previews for the upcoming year of key games that will have an impact on the postseason. Hope to see you for our weekend shows, watch-alongs later this season, and technically the beginning of next year too. Anyways, Week 14 has a ton of awesome matchups for any college football fan from coast to coast. So, shall we begin with what should be the biggest games for the final full weekend of the 2025 college football schedule? Starting with a battle in the great Palmetto State. The best the ACC versus SEC has to offer, Clemson versus South Carolina for the 122nd time. Can Dabo and the Tigers get back to dominating this series? The next classic matchup that returned last season, Texas versus Texas A&M. These two get down for the 120th Lone Star Showdown. Can the Longhorns continue their streak that goes back to 2011? The final clash is the game. Michigan welcomes Ohio State. Can the Buckeyes and Ryan Day get their first ever win over the Wolverines this decade? All right, let's dive into the last week of college football in November. Game 1, the Palmetto Bowl. Clemson plays South Carolina in Columbia. Last year, the defenses for both programs performed excellent +1/-1 defense, with 11 punts between the two schools and 5 forced turnovers. South Carolina came out on top with a couple of late fourth quarter drives to squeak by with a 17-14 win in the 121st Palmetto Bowl. Beginning with Clemson, it's pretty simple for the Tigers O. First downs first. Last year, Clemson struggled to keep the offense on the field. But now with Cade Klubnik having another year under his belt as the Tiger starter, this should make him one of the difference makers for this game. Also, this is his last chance to get a positive record against the Gamecocks and to get one back on South Carolina's home turf. This game will also be big because it's his final game in the regular season to close his case in being a Heisman finalist and possible winner, as Clemson's QB1 is an off-season favorite to raise that prestigious award. The offensive line is going to be a great shield to allow Klubnik to operate. This veteran O-line only gave up 1 sack in last year's encounter and probably looks to the opportunity of going up against South Carolina's great pass rush. For the Tigers defense, just like in other SpOp previews where we've discussed the Gamecocks' previous opponents, you must contain Sellers. Last year, Lenore's helped put the Gamecocks over with a 20-yard touchdown run on the ground. Just a hard ass to neutralize a guy through the air from the secondary, and wrangling a dual threat quarterback who can find a running lane when nothing is there. If the defense can continue their stellar 2024 performance against South Carolina and keep feeding the Clemson offense with turnovers, the Tigers should be in business. They will just need some points in return and to defend. Again, Klubnik has to execute in key moments, and the defense must keep Sellers quiet. To the home team, South Carolina. Now, the Gamecocks, just like many in the SEC, have one of the toughest schedules to play. If South Carolina and Shane Beamer can navigate somewhat unscathed or with a couple of bruises, this game will be massive because they will have a better case this time around for a playoff spot if they don't make the conference championship game, and could help get 4 SEC teams into the postseason tournament. For this one, the defense for the Gamecocks need to have their new linebackers deliver. Brett Johnson is stepping up, and Sean Murphy is coming from the portal. This pair got to have the same production the Gamecocks had last season that was lost to the NFL. Even harder as the front end of the defense had departures to the next level too. But there is a whole season to be played before this contest in late November. On the other side of the ball, the Gamecocks have to dictate the game with long drives and keeping their defense off the field. I think on paper, the offense compared to the defense has the most talent on the roster, and South Carolina needs to use those weapons efficiently. Also, we've mentioned in previous SpOp previews that Sellers and other players can't fumble the ball. The Gamecocks QB1 had one of his 7 fumbles from 2024 in this game last year. If South Carolina can't move the chains through the air, at least their running game and Sellers' feet when expanding the play should be as lethal as it was last season. That's a great backup plan to have. Again, the Gamecocks has to have their new players on defense repeat the similar performance they had in the 2024 game against Clemson, and the offense needs to hold on to the ball to keep their defense fresh and morale up. So, who will be the X factor in this contest? Is it Klubnik putting the cherry on top of a potential Heisman campaign? Or is it Sellers running through the Clemson defense to carry the Gamecocks to victory again? We'll have to wait and see, because this game's results should have an impact on how many teams make it from each of these teams' respective conferences. Game 2 is the Lone Star Showdown. Texas A&M comes to Austin and lines up against Texas. Last year's contest was a low-scoring affair, with the Longhorns taking an early lead in the first half and held on to that lead for a 17-7 victory. The Aggies could not get anything going on offense. In fact, they didn't even put up that 7 points on the scoreboard. The A&M defense got a pick six that went 93 yards to the house. Let's just say it was a hard day at the office for the Aggies D. Beginning with the home team, Texas, who will have one of the best defenses in 2025 and are going to probably make it another miserable night for the away team's offense. Starting by nullifying the A&M running game, Texas held the Aggies' run attack to 82 yards short of the A&M's per game average. You take out the bread and butter approach, you're going to have a good time. And Steve Sarkisian has many of the players that accomplished this back in 2025. Another thing going for the Longhorns on defense is the depth at linebacker. If Texas gets fatigued from a long season, they will have some studs right behind Trey Moore and Anthony Hill Jr. It's actually been a few previews since we have said this. Having depth in a long college football season gets you into championship games and the playoffs. For the Longhorns offense, two can tango when either program performs the ground and pound. I'd expect Texas's running back one carrying most of the load again for this late October game, Travion Weissner, who almost had 200 yards rushing last year against A&M. Also, you have Arch Manning slinging it. The Longhorns should be a more balanced offense, with better ball distribution and a less scripted progressions from the new QB1. Plus, Arch got wheels and maybe gets another TD on the ground. Again, have to take away the best part of the Texas A&M offense by dominating in the trenches and continue to hand off the ball to Weissner or Baxter. This should keep the Aggies on their heels, especially with Manning slinging it. Got to make their opponents think twice. Now to the away team, Texas A&M. Starting with the offense, Mike Elko has to find a better game plan to getting into the end zone. Texas knows what the Aggies want to do, and running the ball will most likely hit a Longhorn wall. That means Marcel Reed needs to play to perfection when he gets the call to air it out. If A&M with the new additions can't put together a proper pass attack, I don't like their chances in this one. Also, with those incoming players, maybe you can draw up some plays for Casey Concepcion, who could be a new element that can help keep A&M alive on the ground. If running between the tackles isn't working, Elko got to find that edge and prepare his team to win leverage by any means necessary. For the Aggies defense, the secondary, just like in the LSU game we previewed for Week 9, has to come correct. If the A&M DBs can make it impossible for Texas to move the ball through the air. This should put more pressure on a younger Longhorn O-line that would want to pass block more than opening up holes through the A&M defense. Because if you remember, in that LSU preview, we mentioned that the Aggies only got 2 sacks on the Tigers, and against Texas last time out, they only recorded 1. This could possibly turn the tables a little bit more in favor for Texas A&M by keeping everything in front of them. And maybe this forces Arch to squeeze one in the wrong window for an interception. But they also have to slow the Longhorns' rushing attack for not much in return. Again, Texas A&M has to somehow move the ball through the air, and the Aggies defense must conduct a no-fly zone to push Texas into making mistakes. So, who will win the showdown in the Lone Star State? Is it Sark and Texas, who have an outstanding defense and tricky attack, or is it Elko and A&M, who has to have an underdog performance to achieve victory? Another one will have to wait till November, as this matchup scoreline could affect Texas's chances of getting back to the SEC championship game. Honorable mentions for Week 14. Georgia heads to Atlanta for a Friday night delight against Georgia Tech. Will we see this game hit the same heights we saw in the 8 overtime classic last year? Also on Friday that week, Arizona heads to Tempe to battle their in-state rivals, Arizona State. Will the Cats bear down this time around by putting up a proper fight against the Sun Devils? In the Big Ten, crosstown rivals meet in the LA Coliseum. UCLA gets it on with USC. Who will ring the victory bell? And will Lincoln Riley still be in charge of the Trojans before or after this game? Over in the SEC, we have a game at the Palace on the Prairie. Oklahoma welcomes LSU. Will the Sooners win enough before this matchup for it to matter on the postseason? And the last game to mention is still in SEC territory, the Iron Bowl. For the 90th time, Alabama plays Auburn. Can the Tigers get their first win over the Tide this decade? The final game is the game. Ohio State comes to Ann Arbor to face Michigan. Buckeyes, Wolverines, day more for the 121st time, as this is a matchup most college football fans have had on their must-watch list for the last 4 years, which Michigan has won every time for all of those top-ranked meetings. Last season's encounter was absolute cinema before and after the final whistle. Because if you joined us for that watch along in 2024, where we were all caught off guard with the actions after the end of regulation. But that's why they call it the game. Let's start with the home squad, Michigan. We've only done an SpOp preview for the Wolverines in Week 2 against Oklahoma, and did the last one all the way back for Week 4 against Nebraska. The Wolverines' offense approach against the Buckeyes last year was to ground and pound the football, which was crazy because they won with only 62 yards through the air, and the crazier thing is that Michigan didn't even get 200 yards rushing. Unfortunately, the Wolverines will most likely be a bit of the same, even this deep into the season with Bryce Underwood. Also, who knows if he is the starter by the end of the season. I understand some Michigan fans that believe in the media who think Underwood is the second coming of Christ for the Wolverines, but I just don't think his rise as a freshman will take off smoothly, as there should be some competition throughout the season from portal pickups. There is Jake Garcia that transferred in late from East Carolina, but I think Mikey Keene could add another element to the Michigan offense and take a bit of the load off the offensive line, who is well coached in run and pass blocking. You can disagree with me all you want, but having a balanced attack just opens up holes in the running game. Sherrone Moore also brought some well-needed depth in the portal for the line. If any of Michigan's starters catch an injury, the Wolverines will have a guy to fill in the interior and at tackle. This should allow them to continue the ground and pound like they've done in the last couple of seasons. Let's talk about the other side of the ball for the Wolverines defense. You guys, I just don't know how you replace two Michigan legends, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. These two and the Wolverines' front six held Ohio State to only 77 yards on the ground. That was better than the average rushing yards per game Michigan gave up in 2024. And they cut the Buckeyes' average yards on the ground per game by more than half. There is no way they can repeat this, even with Ohio State losing linemen and running backs to the NFL. This means the linebackers are going to have a long day in the big house. I think the DBs need to also have to lock down the Buckeyes through the air. Don't think there will be much help with pressure in the pocket. As Michigan didn't record a sack last year, just one in 2023 and 2022, 2021 was the last game Michigan had multiple sacks on Ohio State. The Wolverines just have to be disciplined from front to back on defense. Again, Michigan might want to find another method to scoring enough points to beat the Buckeyes, and the front six has to do the best they can to stopping the opposition's run attack, plus the secondary has to play lights out to keep the Wolverines in the game. Now to the away team, the Ohio State Buckeyes. We have done SpOp previews for the team out of Columbus in week 1 for a massive matchup against Texas. For this one, the Buckeyes have to slice and dice Michigan through the air. Julian Sain should have it in him to deliver some beautiful balls to the Ohio State wide receiver core. We just talked about how Michigan has been lacking sacks on the Buckeyes recently. This should allow Sain enough time to step up for this occasion, even with the Wolverines playing everything in front of them and preventing deep balls. This is why we say slice and dice. Short game passes will be key to getting the chains moving, and nice drives that end up with some points on the board. For the Buckeye defense, if Michigan plays the same style of run the ball, the Ohio State front six has to be ready to play tedious football. Actually, probably a front seven with a safety dropping into the box. That means Caleb Downs, like last year, should be heavily involved in stopping the run. This game will be determined on who dictates the trenches. If Ohio State can't manage this efficiently, the chances of preventing the Wolverines' streak getting to 5 in a row goes up. Another thing that will suck for the Buckeye defense is Michigan not trying to pass and leaning into the run. That takes the best part of the Buckeyes D in 2025 out of the equation. Again, Ohio State must carve the Michigan defense up through the air to take advantage of the lack of proper pressure in their pocket. And the Buckeye defense has to not get lulled into stopping the run attack of the Wolverines. So, the game's winner will continue to be decided on who wins at the line of scrimmage. Can't wait for this contest, as the lead up to the game never disappoints. And being able to watch these two giants play is an absolute blessing. Hashtag blessed. Slide in note, this will be the first time ever these two meet off of back-to-back titles between the programs. I think this game is going to have the same setup from last season. Michigan trying to keep Ohio State out of the Big Ten championship game, which means the stakes are even higher for the 121st meeting of the game. Alright, that is it for our week-by-week SpOp previews of the upcoming 2025 season. We'll see how these predictions for the biggest games of the year hold up when each weekend comes to us. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully you consider taking a seat with me on the couch for our live shows and the watch-alongs this season. Okay, bye-bye for now from the couch.